The restaurant was small, warm, and smelled of garlic and old memories. Alex Thorne wasn't supposed to be there. His meetings were always planned to the second, his calendar packed with deals and deadlines that kept his life neat, predictable, and perfectly under control. But that afternoon, something unexpected happened. His driver had taken a wrong turn, a small mistake that changed everything. Tired of arguing with traffic, Alex decided to step out and grab a quick coffee before heading back. That's when he noticed it. A quiet little Italian restaurant tucked between two worn buildings. The sign above the door flickered faintly, and laughter drifted out into the cool air. He almost ignored it. Almost. Inside, the world felt softer. The walls were covered in old photographs, the tables mismatched, the air filled with the hum of families sharing stories. It was the kind of place Alex never had time for. He took a seat near the window, phone in hand, scrolling through messages that suddenly felt meaningless. Then he heard it, the sound of laughter, light and pure, cutting through the noise around him. He turned his head slightly, and his heart stopped. Across the room sat Sophie, the woman who had vanished from his life 3 years ago. Her hair was a little longer now, tied back loosely, her face calmer but touched with something he couldn't name. Around her sat 3 small boys. They were loud, messy, and full of life. One was stacking breadsticks, another coloring the paper menu, and the smallest was giggling so hard his cheeks turned red. And in that moment, Alex forgot how to breathe. The boys had his eyes. His unmistakable blue eyes, the same shade he saw in the mirror every morning. His mind refused to believe it, but his heart already knew. Every carefully built wall around him cracked at once. His perfect, controlled world began to crumble. And all it took was one glance. Alex sat frozen, his coffee untouched as the truth quietly exploded inside him. The noise of the restaurant faded until all he could hear was the echo of the boys' laughter. He couldn't look away from them, the way one wrinkled his nose when he smiled, the way another drummed his fingers on the table, or how the smallest clung to Sophie's arm with the same stubbornness he once had as a child. Every movement, every expression was a reflection of him. He felt the ground shift beneath his certainty. These weren't coincidences. They were living proof of a past he thought was gone forever. He wanted to stand up, to walk over, to say something, anything, but his voice refused to obey. How could he begin? What words could possibly explain the storm inside him? The woman he had loved and lost, the one he had searched for until exhaustion replaced hope, was right there, living a life he was never invited to be part of. Sophie looked different, not just older but stronger. There was a calm power in the way she handled the chaos around her. She wasn't the frightened woman who left without a goodbye. She had become someone new, someone who had learned to survive without him. That realization hit harder than any boardroom loss ever had. As she reached for a napkin, their eyes met for the first time. Time stopped. Recognition flashed in her gaze, followed by shock, then something else, fear, maybe pain. The color drained from her face. The fork slipped from her hand and clattered against the plate, breaking the fragile rhythm of the moment. The children looked up, confused, their chatter halting. Alex felt his chest tighten. He didn't know whether to smile or run. The life he had built on power and control was useless now. All that remained was the truth. 3 little souls and a woman who had once been his entire world. And in that single, shattering moment, Alex realized that no amount of success could prepare him for the question that burned through his heart. Why didn't she tell me? For a long moment, neither of them moved. Sophie's hands trembled slightly as she tried to steady herself, forcing a small smile for the boys who were now watching her with innocent curiosity. Alex's heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the hum of the restaurant. He hadn't planned this, hadn't expected to face the ghost of his past in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. Yet here she was, and with her, the truth he had spent years trying to bury. Finally, Sophie whispered something to the children and stood up. Alex felt a rush of panic. Was she going to leave again? Before he could think, he rose from his chair. Their eyes locked once more, and in that silent stare, years of anger, confusion, and longing clashed. She walked slowly toward him, her steps unsure, like someone walking through a dream they weren't ready to wake from. When she stopped a few feet away, neither spoke. The air between them was heavy with everything that had been left unsaid. "Alex," she finally said, her voice soft but steady. His name on her lips felt like both a wound and a miracle. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Where she went, why she left, how she could keep something so big from him. But when he opened his mouth, the words wouldn't come. All he could manage was a quiet, "Why?" Her eyes glistened as she looked back at the table where the boys sat waiting. "Because I didn't have a choice," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "You wouldn't have understood back then." He flinched. The old cold pride he once wore like armor tried to rise, but it was no use. Looking at her now, he didn't see the woman who had betrayed him. He saw someone who had carried an impossible burden alone. For the first time in years, Alex felt something unfamiliar and deeply human: regret. The youngest boy waved from the table, calling out, "Mom!" Sophie smiled faintly through her tears, and Alex realized that everything he thought he knew about his life, the victories, the power, the control, had meant nothing compared to this one fragile truth. He had been a father all along, and he never even knew it. Alex stood there, his heart thundering in his chest as the weight of her words pressed down on him. "You wouldn't have understood back then." The sentence replayed in his mind again and again. She was right, and that was what hurt the most. 3 years ago, he was a different man. Ruthless, ambitious, and too focused on building his empire to see the cracks forming in the life he shared with her. Love had been a distraction, something he thought he could control like everything else. But standing there now, watching Sophie wipe her tears and walk back to the children, he realized how wrong he had been. He hesitated before following her. Every step felt heavier, like he was walking through the past. When he reached their table, 3 curious pairs of blue eyes stared up at him. "Mom, who's that man?" one of them asked, his small voice full of wonder. Sophie froze. Her hand tightened around her napkin, and for a second, Alex thought she might lie. "But she didn't. He's someone I used to know," she said softly, her gaze flicking to Alex's face with a silent plea. "Don't push this now." But one of the boys, the boldest of the 3, leaned forward and said with a grin, "He looks like us." The air grew still. Sophie's lips parted, but no words came out. Alex knelt down slowly, his voice low, trembling. "What's your name, buddy?" "Liam," the boy said proudly. "And that's Noah and Ethan." Alex's throat tightened. He looked at each of them, memorizing every detail. Their messy hair, the small dimple in Liam's cheek, the mischievous spark in Ethan's eyes. It was like seeing reflections of his own childhood he never knew existed. Sophie cleared her throat, her voice shaking slightly. Alex, please. This isn't the place, but he couldn't stop. He smiled gently at the boys. You three must be pretty amazing if you've got your mom smiling like that. Their giggles filled the room again. And for the first time in years, Alex felt warmth spread through his chest. Not from success. Not from achievement, but from something real. Something he never thought he'd have. He stood and looked at Sophie with quiet determination. You're right, he said softly. This isn't the place, but I'm not walking away this time. Her eyes widened, fear and hope warring in them. The moment felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter. Yet somewhere deep inside, both of them knew this story wasn't over. It was only beginning. That night, Alex couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw their faces. 3 small boys with his eyes, his smile, his energy. The image replayed over and over, each time cutting deeper. He sat by his window, the city lights stretching beneath him like a reflection of his once untouchable life. For years, he believed he had everything: wealth, power, and the respect of everyone around him. But now, sitting in the quiet of his penthouse, it all felt hollow. He would have traded every deal, every dollar, for just one of those lost years. One bedtime story, one hug, one moment of being their father. When morning came, he made a decision. He went back to that little Italian restaurant, even though he knew they wouldn't be there. He just needed to feel close to the place where everything had changed. The owner, an older man with kind eyes, recognized him and said, "The lady you were looking for? She left this." He handed Alex a folded note. His heart raced as he opened it. In Sophie's handwriting were only a few words. "Meet me at the park tomorrow. Noon." When he arrived, the park was alive with laughter and sunlight. Sophie sat on a bench, watching the boys chase one another through the grass. She turned when she saw him, and for a moment, neither spoke. There was no anger left, just years of silence waiting to be broken. "I didn't want to keep them from you," she said quietly, "but I was scared. You were living a life I didn't belong in. I wanted them to have peace, not headlines." Alex took a deep breath. "You should have trusted me," he said softly, not as a man demanding answers, but as someone begging for a second chance. She looked at him, eyes full of emotion. "Would you have stayed back then? When your company was all that mattered?" The question pierced through him. He didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. He wouldn't have, not then. But now, as he watched his sons run toward him, laughing, something inside him shifted. He knelt down, arms open, unsure if they'd come. But they did, all 3 of them, tumbling into his embrace like they'd known him forever. And in that instant, Alex Thorne, the man who once ruled empires, found the one thing he never knew he was missing: a reason to stay. Weeks passed, and everything Alex once thought important began to fade into the background. The ringing of his phone no longer controlled him, and the endless meetings that once defined his life started to feel meaningless. What mattered now were the small, ordinary moments that once would have gone unnoticed. The sound of laughter filling his apartment, the smell of pancakes on a Saturday morning, the feeling of tiny hands grabbing his when they crossed the street together. For the first time in years, Alex felt alive. Not because of success, but because of love that had quietly waited for him to find it. Sophie remained cautious. She watched him from a distance, waiting to see if this new version of Alex was real or just temporary. But he didn't give up. Every day he showed up, at the park, at school, even at her doorstep with coffee just to talk. He didn't try to explain the past anymore. He focused on building something new. The walls between them began to fall, brick by brick, replaced with something fragile but real. Trust. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Alex stood with Sophie and the boys at the edge of the pier. The twins were trying to skip stones while the youngest clung to his leg, laughing. Sophie looked at them, then at Alex, her eyes soft. "They've been waiting for this," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "So have I." She hesitated for a moment before saying, "I never wanted to hurt you. I just didn't think you'd ever want this kind of life." He looked at her, his voice steady. "I didn't know I needed it, but now, I can't imagine anything else." The wind brushed against them, carrying the sound of the boys' laughter over the water. Sophie took a deep breath and finally let her guard down. For the first time in years, she reached out and took his hand. It wasn't a promise of perfection, but it was enough. A quiet beginning born from years of silence. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Alex realized the truth he had been running from all his life. The greatest success isn't measured in numbers or power. It's found in the hearts that wait for you when the world goes quiet. And as he stood there, surrounded by the family he never knew he had, he finally understood what it meant to truly live.